So whodunits, you've all hopefully seen one. There are classics like Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes, or even slightly newer satires like Clue. It's a very established genre, but in 2019 a movie came out that did something very interesting. It took to this established, rather old genre that doesn't quite get too many new releases, and made it into something unique, something new. And in my opinion, it made the perfect whodunit. In this video, I'm going to talk about two main points that I think are what make this a perfect whodunit. And to start us off, I'm going to be talking about Knives Out, structure, and plot.
It's the type of movies that I like that I don't think get made often enough. It kind of has a really fun quality to it. Even though the characters are grounded, even though the story is serious, at times it still feels I don't know. Murder mysteries just, it reminds me of my youth, like something you would read in school.
Knives Out has some extremely well thought out writing, and Rian Johnson did an amazing job, especially being that he did this in just 6 months. But besides being really well thought out, there's another really interesting element to the writing that I think needs to be brought up. Well, actually, two things, but one of them won't take very long. First off, it's a comedy, which is very rare for whodunits, with really the only ones that I could really think of are Clue and Scream 4? But unlike Clue, Knives Out pulls off comedy without being a satire or a parody.
If I was the killer, I would kill you next. Huh? I said if.
And the comedy really helps this movie become its own thing, and actually helps some of the plot points work better. Take Ransom, for example. His character is a jerk, but yet everybody seems to like him, relatively speaking anyway, not like actually like the character, but find him funny because, well, his character is funny.
I think this could be the best thing to happen to all of you! What does he mean by that?
And it helps the twist at the end work a lot more because you almost forget about the fact that he's an awful person. Pulling off comedy on the way that Rian Johnson did with this script is really impressive because he didn't let the comedy hold him back. A lot of times, movies that are on a genre that's usually not comedy have to have the comedy as the main focus, but the comedy is just a tool to help make this movie better, more enjoyable, and a unique experience. The other thing I wanted to talk about is structure. Now, another channel has made a great video covering a lot of the same things I'll be talking about. So go check out Just Right's video, How Knives Out Switches Genre Twice, because it's really good. But I'm going to do my best to talk about this point because I think it's really unique and interesting, and a big reason that Knives Out is special and unique and a good whodunit.
It's sort of not so much a fresh take on a whodunit, it's sort of modernized and given an edge.
You may or may not know that whodunits usually follow a story structure, a basic kind of layout of how each individual plot point will take place. And they usually go somewhat like this. The introductions to characters, the big crime, usually a murder, the investigation, the big revelation, and then the explanation of said revelation. It's an effective little formula that most whodunits use, except for, you guessed it, Knives Out. Knives Out goes more like big crime, in this case suicide, or maybe murder, introduction and investigation, establishing Marta's side of the story, Marta trying to avoid getting caught, her mistake, revelation, and explanation. This changes the movie a lot, probably more than you'd think. following Marta and her actions for most of the second act changes the whole feel of the movie and almost changes it to a feel that you get of a crime movie. You're moving with the person who is probably guilty, but you're on her side and you're trying to see if she can avoid getting caught. It's a really impressive thing that Rian Johnson pulled off. Most whodunits wouldn't be able to do hardly any of what this story does, because most whodunits come at it from the perspective of the detective, which in this case would be Blanc. And while you'd still have the same twist, you'd lose all of the emotional core of the movie, and it just would be like any other whodunit. I'm not saying to make a good whodunit you have to change up that formula. I'm just saying that one of the reasons that this is a great whodunit is that it doesn't take the mold of a normal whodunit. It takes the genre and expands it into something unique. The other point I wanted to talk about that in my opinion can make or break a whodunit is character. Most whodunits are practically carried by interesting characters and big stars, and this movie, while not carried, is pretty much no different. The Thrombey family, Marta, Blanc, and well, all of the characters are really unique, and the casting choices are perfect. So I'm going to try to break down some of what I think are the most important and best characters of Knives Out to hopefully show how to make a good character in a whodunit. I'm going to kind of talk about the Thrombey family as a whole before I get to specifically Ransom and Harlan, which are the only ones I'm going to be talking about individually from the Thrombey family. The Thrombey family, most of them anyway, are jerks. And I didn't realize how bad they were until I rewatched this as many times as I did, which, for the record, was 11 times. I'm really glad Marta is in this story, because we wouldn't really be able to see how bad they are without her. And like I said, on the first watch, it may seem like they're just a little selfish, but not much more than that. But as you rewatch it, you find tiny little things, like the ways they talk to and about Marta, and even small things like the fact that they all say that they were outvoted in getting Marta to come to the funeral. And you start to dislike them more and more, and it works for both setting up them as maybe suspects and getting you to like Marta, because she puts up with, a lot of stuff because she wants to be there for Harlan. The Thrombey family as a whole, even if each of their individual characters can seem a little shallow, really work with the themes and the plot of the movie. And I mean, they're just extremely well written and well casted, and the cast all has great chemistry. And by the way, it's no wonder that they all had great chemistry, because the house was so far away from any of the trailers that the entire time they were filming at the house, all the actors, when they weren't doing scenes, just hung out in the basement and played games. So, yeah, take notes. Harlan Thrombey is truly the most sad character in this movie. He's a big reason, if not the main reason, his family is the way they are, and he knew it. He regrets almost every decision he made, and well, he needed Marta. Marta is everything that he wasn't, and he was trying to put everything back together. He cut all the people he loved off because he was trying to make sure that they didn't make the same mistakes that he did. And then to end it all off, if he wouldn't have tried to do things his way one last time, he would have been alive at the end of this movie. He's a sad character, but he's super important to this movie, and in more ways than just from the plot. He's a giant part of the emotional core of this movie. The connection and the friendship that he and Marta had are what drives this movie, and is why Marta pretty much is the way she is for most of this movie. Hugh, or Ransom, or rather Ransom for the purpose of this video, is the worst of the Thrombeys. He's everything that Harlan was trying to get behind him. But one thing I want to specifically bring up is Ransom's sweater. His sweater was a hit sensation. Around the world, people were buying these sweaters, putting them on, and wearing them to screenings of Knives Out. I even bought one after watching it. But there's actually a lot more to Ransom's character in that sweater than you may think. You may or may not have noticed that his sweater has a lot of holes in it. But why? I seriously doubt he'd be doing any work that would get this kind of damage on his sweater. Well, it shows a lot of his lifestyle. It shows that his whole life he's always been given everything and that he has enough money that he simply doesn't care. It got torn up just because he treats it bad, because he knows he could always just buy another one. And he lives by this lifestyle, this sweater lifestyle, if you will. And then, when Harlan tells him that he is cut out of the will, his sweater lifestyle is threatened, and he'll do whatever it takes to protect his sweatery lifestyle. And just in case you really hate or doubt my sweatery analogy, the costume designer, Jenny Egan, and Ryan Johnson actually commented about the sweater and its holes in it, so I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. Ransom is a direct product of Harlan. Harlan even says it himself, that he sees so much of him in Ransom, which is why they fight so much. Harlan knows and sees himself in Ransom, so he sees all the mistakes that he made when he was younger, and is trying to make sure that Ransom doesn't make those same mistakes. It's another testament to the writing that they almost make us forget about Ransom as a possibility. During all of the introductions, when they talk about Ransom, and even when you see Ransom for the first time, you just kind of get the feeling, you're like, oh yeah, it's him. And I mean, it is. But they do a good enough job enduring him to you using comedy and, the fact that he helps out Marta. And that, coupled with the fact that, while it pretty much shows you that Marta is guilty, he kind of just fades from the back of your mind as a possibility. But then, when Ryan, at the end, shows us the twist, and slaps us in the face with the fact that it was Ransom the whole time, it shows how effective the writing for the twist is. And never once in my 11 watches of this movie was I ever bored with the twist. In the end, I think Ransom is one of the most interesting characters, even though Marta is the main character, and he has significantly less time. He affects the movie almost as much as Marta does. And speaking of Marta, so now we've made it outside of the Thrombey family, and we are to the main character, Marta Cabrera. I've heard some people say that Blanc is the main character, or at least he's like a second lead or something, but he really isn't, and I'll talk more about that later in his section. Like I said earlier, this movie turns into more of a crime story throughout the middle, and Marta is our average criminal, except she's not your average criminal. She's everything that the Thrombey family isn't, and besides following whatever people have told her to do, I don't think she does anything wrong throughout this entire movie. She could have easily done stuff like let Fran die, but she doesn't. Because she has, like Blanc says, a kind heart. And because her character is like this, she makes for one of the most unique protagonists in any movie, let alone a whodunit. She's paired up against this family of just really awful people, but yet she has such a kind heart, she's willing to help pretty much all of them. And throughout the course of this movie, even though her actions get worse and worse, she still doesn't stop trying to help people. Most people, especially protagonists who may or may not have committed a crime, will care a lot more about saving themselves than helping other people. And she was the one who helped Harlan. She was the one who gave him all of the suggestions for his family and really gave him the last bit of closure he had in his life. So the last character I'm going to talk about is Benoit Blanc. And Blanc is definitely an interesting character. because as it was pointed out to me by one of my friends, Blanc doesn't really have much of an arc, emotional or otherwise. But I don't think he necessarily needs one. I think the main reason Blanc is here is to bring everyone together. Like I said, he's not the main character. He's the glue of the story, but not the main character. And I know that may sound like a cop-out answer for why Blanc is just an underdeveloped, awful character and is trash and just should not be in this movie, and I can't believe they're making a sequel following him and not Marta. But it's true. He's here because he needs to be. I think one of the best ways to sum up how this character affects the story is to talk about how Daniel Craig, the actor who played him, affected the creation of this movie. So, before they had everybody signed on to this movie, and before they even had a studio, they just had Ryan, his script, and their producer. But the producer saw that Daniel Craig had just said he wouldn't be working on the next Bond film. Now, that didn't end up being true. He's doing one, I think it comes out 2021, but he was free, and the producer saw it as an opportunity to get Daniel Craig onto the movie. So he called Rian Johnson while he was on his vacation before they started the movie and said, "You need to fly down and get Daniel Craig on this movie." So he did. He gave Daniel Craig a copy of the script, and Daniel read it over and loved it, and he decided to sign on to the movie. Then after that, a lot of the actors and even Ryan commented that a lot of the studios, after seeing that Daniel Craig was signed on to the movie, were eager to sign on as well. He's the glue that puts all these pieces together. The detective needed to be there or the story wouldn't happen, but he doesn't need to have an arc just like the other family members didn't necessarily need one. He's not the main character. Marta is. And if not Marta, then Ransom, then Harland, but not Blanc. So wow, this one took a long time to collect my thoughts on and what exactly I was gonna do. I had the idea to make this video pretty much almost directly after I saw this movie, but it definitely took a while to figure out what specifically I was gonna talk about. I hope this section shows the importance of the characters in Knives Out, and if you really didn't quite get it from everything I said, imagine switching out some of the cast and characters from this movie with any of the generic characters that you'd get in a normal whodunit, like out of an Agatha Christie movie, or even some of the characters out of Clue, and it wouldn't work nearly as well. Now, I wish a lot more of what I wanted to talk about could fit into this script, because there's so much love and work that went into this movie on almost every front. It's great. You have amazing cinematography, costume design, blocking, production design, set design. Everything in this movie, pretty much in my opinion, is almost perfect. I don't call it perfect because I don't really call any movie perfect, but man, this movie is pretty darn close. This movie is a masterclass in whodunits, and I really hope more whodunits come out because of this movie. And not necessarily carbon copies of this one, because that would be missing the whole point of what made this movie good in the first place. But anyway, if you're making a whodunit, or any mystery for that matter, remember what I think are the two most important parts of any whodunit: character and plot. And hopefully, you too can make a perfect whodunit.
His name is Guacardo.
Oh, Guacardo, mi amor.
Mi amor.
So Guacardo is this awkward little avocado, and he's afraid of his sisters because they want to kill him.
What's this? What is
Oh, he's
it?
big.
This is the avocado.
The pizza de avocado.
Oh.
Guacardo.
Oh, of course. Oh, I got it. I don't
God.
You know, I wish I liked avocados. They're so healthy for you.
Wait, you don't eat avocados?
I don't like them. So we're cool, buddy. I don't want to eat you now. I just want to let you live.
Oh yeah, because actually that was my next question.
You
like,
can just be
if you
hungry.
guys get to like kill avocado to make guacamole, like, would you hide the body? What would you do?
See, he's panicked because you'd eat this whole thing, wouldn't you?
Oh, oh yeah. There's not a single meal I eat without avocados.
He's like,
Carlos cousins, you know.